Yes, hello to you all once again, and another very warm welcome back to your number one and favourite classic dirt bike TV channel, where, as you know, we try our very best to continue to rediscover more of those long lost vintage dirt bikes from back in the day. Now, if you're a brand new subscriber to my channel, I do hope you're enjoying my video content, because we have been doing this kind of stuff here on YouTube for about 15 years or so now. So we currently have, I think it's over 2,000 videos currently here on my channel. So there's plenty to see and do with regards looking at these old vintage racers. So coming up next, we're going to continue our video footage from the Telford 2022 Classic Dirt Bike Show, and this next featured machine is another rare bike, and it's certainly another fantastic restoration that I came across over the course of the 2 days. So let's just dive straight into that video and take a look at this lovely 1974 KTM 250 GS Enduro. Now, this rather nice looking 1974 KTM 250 GS Enduro is another vintage race bike that I came across at the 2022 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. And this featured machine was actually sitting on the Classic Dirt Bike magazine stand at the show, as it was their centrepiece to their new spring issue, number 62 of their publication. Now, I didn't manage to get too many details of the bike on the day of the show, but I expect that if you'd like to know the full and the complete story on the build of this bike, then I suggest that you take a look at the Classic Dirt Bike magazine website and grab a copy of this issue number 62, where you'll be furnished with all of the facts and the details about this very nice bike and how it was all put together. And so the current information that I do have on this machine is that it is, of course, a 1974 GS 250 KTM Enduro bike, which was regarded in 1974 as a transitional model, because this bike here was still using the older KTM two-stroke motor from 1973. And basically, this was KTM's very first in-house built engine that was bolted into a brand new frame. Now, these 74 KTM models were often described as the Turbino as regards its chassis, because it had relatively small diameter frame tubes that ran from the footrest right up to the seat rails for that 1974 year of production. Now, the bike is currently owned by Mauro Cipollette Gotet, who first bought the bike in 1988, and he used it regularly at local Enduros while he was living near his family home in northeast Italy. Now, Mauro had many years of fun on this old bike, and when the time came and he had the opportunity, he then brought the bike back to where he was then based at that time here in the UK, and he then decided to do a full restoration of this bike, just to repay the many years of enjoyment that he had while he was riding it. Now, before the bike's refurbishment, it was pretty fair to say that the machine was looking pretty scruffy after its many enduro events that it took part in Mauro's native Italy. And after Mauro had then stripped the bike completely down to the sum of its parts, it was evident that the bike was going to need a lot of work, as almost every single component on the bike was going to require some kind of refurbishment. But there were still enough parts salvageable so as to keep the originality of this very nice bike. Although the entire restoration project was certainly a labour of love for Mauro, the bike's owner, and when he eventually finished it, it looked as good as new once again, and was well worthy of a major article in Classic Dirt Bike magazine. And so, as I said, if you want to learn exactly what was done to this 250 KTM, then check out that issue number 62 of the Classic Dirt Bike magazine. And so, as you'd expect, this 250 KTM motor was completely stripped down, and every bearing, gasket and seal was then replaced, and the motor's barrel was also treated to a full rebore and oversized piston, although the original barrel was still on its stock 71mm bore prior to that work taking place. Now, the gearbox on this 74 or 73 motor is a 6-speed unit, and at this point in 1974 the casings were all painted black, although later in this year, of course, they would then be painted silver instead. Now, to feed our 250 KTM motor with its fuel, it was fitted with a quite sensible Bing 54 carburetor, and because again this was a KTM transitional model, the carb was fitted with both a tickler and a slide choke lever. And once more, to sort out the sparks for our Austrian made engine, an electronic Motoplat ignition system was fitted to make sure that the vital spark occurred at the optimum moment. Now, after many years of track action, our GS's exhaust system had certainly taken a battering, and it was a quite slow process taking out all of the many dings and dents that it had suffered from over the years, although eventually it was all brought back to its original 1974 status once again, and then the tailpipe was repacked with brand new silencer packing, and Mauro even went just that one step further here, and he also had the tailpipe's end cap re-chromed, which of course it would have had back in the day. But it was a lot of work, but well worth it in the end to see the exhaust's finished article. And it was all completed, as you can see, to a very high standard. Now, moving on to the front end of our KTM, and as you can see here, a set of Italian-made Marzoccis are bolted on to our GS, and these forks underwent a full restoration with regards all of their internals and associated seals, etc. And the inner fork stanchions were also sent to the local metal platers to be re-chromed, with their outer stanchions repainted, of course, as they would have been back in 1974. But again, the Italian Marzocchi forks were also bolted on to these Marzocchi alloy fork yokes, and these this time were actually powder coated silver and not polished in the usual fashion. But once again, these were all original parts from 1974. And once more, both the front and the rear wheel hubs on our KTM 250 are made from magnesium, as is of course their front and rear brake backplates as well. Now, this was done more than likely just to save precious weight on what was still a relatively light motorcycle for that early 1970s year. Now again, the bike's front and rear wheels are its original alloy Acront rims, and these only really needed some deep cleaning by way of aqua blasting just to bring them back to life once again. Now, with regards these spokes, now KTM in 1974 of course made their own spokes for this model, and it just so happens that Mauro did manage to buy an original new old stock set from another KTM enthusiast who had a spare set in his possession. Now, once again, at the rear of our GS 250, a set of Italian Marzocchi piggyback twin shocks, which were once more completely stripped down, and a rebuild kit was then sourced to sort out all of their internals. And the springs were then also repainted, and once the completed and assembled units were then refitted back onto the bike, they certainly sorted out the rear end part of this KTM's restoration. Now, at first glance, when you take a look at this KTM's fuel tank, you would almost swear that it was either made of steel or maybe lighter alloy, but this fuel cell here is actually made from fiberglass, and as I remember from that 1974 year, I think these were called the watermelon because of its shape. But these enduro tanks were slightly bigger than the motocross versions, as many of these GS 250s were exported to the US, and as I've said in previous videos, these older fiberglass fuel tanks don't take too kindly to modern day fuels, as they do tend to eat away at the insides of the tank, although it's said that Mauro has actually fitted some kind of liner inside this fuel cell to protect it, so hopefully that will help keep the erosion process to a minimum with regards leaving fuel stored in it for very long periods. Now, when it came to the restoration of the bike's seat, now its original fiberglass seat base and its foam were reused on this restoration, although the bike's seat cover was certainly past its sell-by date, and it had to be replaced with another new old stock item just to keep some of that originality of this very nice bike. And as you can see, it certainly had plenty padding to keep the rider comfortable on those long enduro rides. So as we move on to the business end of our 74 KTM, we have the bike's stock Italian Tomaselli handlebars, complete with their Magura clutch and brake levers as well, and of course their associated lever covers as well. But again, a good quality Magura gasser throttle with their Magura grips, and also a handlebar choke lever there to operate the cold start on that big Bing carburetor. Now, the original mudguards that were fitted to the bike had seen much better days with their long hours on the enduro racetracks, and these were just far too gone to be used again on a quality restoration such as our KTM, although these high quality replacements came from KTM part supplier Andre Horvath's Enduro Klassiker Emporium in Austria, who of course are your go-to spare part supplier for all things classic KTM. Although without doubt Mauro has certainly made a superb job on the restoration of this quite rare 1974 KTM 250 GS, and between all of his hard work that he did on powder coating that light tubular steel chassis right down to the full rebuild of the 250 two-stroke Austrian made motor, another very rare piece of our off-road motorcycling history has again been brought back to life. But in terms of their rarity, I can safely say that you'll be very hard pressed to see one of these KTMs taking part in twin shock or vintage racing in this modern day, as there are very few of them still around. And although we've only covered the very basics of this machine's rejuvenation, if you want to know the full, and complete story of this featured 74 KTM, then make sure that you go out and grab a copy of issue number 62 of Classic Dirt Bike magazine. Well, there you have it. I do hope you enjoyed that walk around that quite rare and very nice 1974 KTM 250 Enduro bike, and that was a machine, of course, that was sitting on the Classic Dirt Bike magazine stand at the 2022 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. So coming up in my next video posting, I've had a couple of requests from some of my YouTube subscribers, and they'd like me to take another look at this fantastic 1989 GM Star 500 Myco. Now, this is a bike that I did feature many years ago here on my channel, but it's been such a popular bike here on CDB TV that my subscribers would like me to take another look at this fantastic machine. So that's what we will be doing in my next video posting. But until then, of course, everybody continue to be safe and well out there when you're riding those old vintage dirt bikes, because we want to see you back here again very soon to talk about more of this style of vintage iron right here on your #1 and favourite Classic Dirt Bike TV channel.